The woman standing in the dusty street of Mojave, California, had nothing left to lose. And everyone in town knew it or thought they did, anyway, whispering behind their hands about how Jacob Fletcher's daughter had been ruined by that gambler who disappeared in the night. Josephine Fletcher kept her chin high as she walked past the general store in the blistering July heat of 1878. Her worn calico dress doing nothing to hide the fact that she'd lost weight these past 3 months, ever since her father died and left her with nothing but debts and a reputation torn to shreds. The sun beat down mercilessly on the desert town, making the air shimmer above the hard-packed earth. She could feel their eyes on her, could hear the whispers that followed her like tumbleweeds in the wind. Mrs. Henderson clutched her daughter closer as Josephine passed. Mr. Peterson turned his back entirely, suddenly fascinated by the saddles hanging in his shop window. She had come into town for one reason only, to see if the posting at the saloon was still available. Any job, any work at all. Her small inheritance had run dry weeks ago, and the boarding house where she'd been staying since selling her father's property to pay his gambling debts had made it clear that sentiment only stretched so far. She needed money, and she needed it desperately. The Lucky Strike Saloon stood at the end of the main street, a 2-story building that looked better maintained than most establishments in this hardscrabble town. Josephine had never been inside before. Proper young ladies did not frequent such places, her father had always said, though he himself had spent plenty of evenings there before his heart gave out. The irony was not lost on her. She pushed through the swinging doors, momentarily blinded as her eyes adjusted from the bright sunlight to the dim interior. The saloon was quieter than she expected at this hour, with only a handful of men nursing drinks at scattered tables. A woman in a bright red dress played a melancholy tune on an upright piano in the corner. Behind the bar, a heavy-set man with an impressive mustache looked up at her entrance, his expression shifting from surprise to something harder. "We do not need any," he began, but another voice cut him off. "Let her speak, Tommy." Josephine turned toward the voice and found herself looking at a man seated alone at a table near the back. He was perhaps 28 or 29, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes so pale blue they seemed to catch what little light filtered through the saloon's windows. He wore a dusty black vest over a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and there was a stillness about him that suggested he did not waste words or movements. A ledger lay open before him, columns of numbers marching down the pages. "I am looking for work," Josephine said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I saw a posting for a bookkeeper position," the bartender snorted. "That position was filled weeks ago, miss, and even if it was not filled," the man at the table interrupted again. He closed the ledger and stood, moving with an easy grace that reminded Josephine of the ranch hands she'd known as a child, men who spent their days in the saddle. He was tall, she realized, topping 6 feet easily. "Tommy here cannot add 2 numbers together without using his fingers, and I have had quite enough of trying to make sense of these books myself." "Now, Levi, you know the town would not take kindly to," Tommy started, but Levi Thornton. Josephine knew the name now. Everyone in Mojave knew the rancher who'd bought the old Morrison spread and turned it profitable again, fixed him with a look that could have frozen the desert sun. "I do not recall asking the town's opinion on who I hire," Levi said quietly. His gaze shifted to Josephine. "Can you actually keep books, or are you just desperate?" The bluntness should have offended her, but Josephine found it oddly refreshing after months of whispers and sideways glances. "Both," she answered honestly. "My father taught me. I managed his accounts for 5 years before he died." "Jacob Fletcher," Levi said, recognition flickering across his face. I heard he passed. I am sorry. Thank you. She waited, hardly daring to breathe. She needed this. She needed this more than she had needed anything in her life. Levi studied her for a long moment, and Josephine had the unsettling sensation of being truly seen, not just looked at. Whatever he found in her face must have satisfied him because he nodded once, decisively. The job is yours. $20 a month plus room and board. You will stay in the foreman's old quarters at the ranch. He built himself a house closer to his wife's family, so it is sitting empty. The work is honest, the pay is fair, and what you do on your own time is your own business. Are we agreed? $20 a month. It was more than generous for bookkeeping work. Room and board meant she would not be homeless. Josephine felt something loosen in her chest, some tight knot of fear that had been choking her for weeks. Yes, she said. Yes, we are agreed. Good. Levi picked up his hat from the table, a dusty black Stetson that had seen better days. I have business in town today, but I will send my foreman, Miguel Santos, to collect you tomorrow morning. Be ready at dawn. We keep early hours at the Thornton Ranch. He moved past her toward the door, then paused. And Miss Fletcher? He did not turn around. I do not care what this town thinks it knows about you. I care whether you can do the work I am paying you for. Everything else is just noise. Then he was gone, the saloon doors swinging shut behind him, leaving Josephine standing in the dim room with Tommy staring at her in disbelief. He is going to regret that, Tommy muttered, shaking his head. The whole town will be talking by supper time. They are already talking, Josephine said quietly. At least now I will have a roof over my head while they do. She left the saloon and walked back through town with her head high, though her hands shook slightly at her sides. She had a job. She had a place to stay. For the first time since her father's death, since Daniel Turner had sweet-talked his way into her trust and then vanished with what little money she had hidden away, Josephine felt like she might survive this after all. The whispers followed her, louder now. Someone had clearly already spread the word about Levi Thornton hiring her. She caught fragments as she passed, shameless. What is he thinking? That poor man does not know what he is getting into, but she kept walking, kept her eyes forward, kept breathing. By the time she reached her boarding house, a cramped room in Mrs. Sullivan's establishment that cost more than it was worth, she felt exhausted despite the early hour. Mrs. Sullivan was waiting for her in the front parlor, her round face set in disapproving lines. I heard you found employment, the older woman said without preamble, with Levi Thornton. Yes, madam, I will be moving to the ranch tomorrow, so I wanted to settle my account with you. Josephine counted out the last of her coins, barely enough to cover what she owed. Mrs. Sullivan took the money without comment, her lips pressed into a thin line. That man has no idea what kind of trouble he is inviting, Mrs. Sullivan said. You ought to have the decency to tell him the truth about yourself before you taint his reputation along with your own. Josephine felt anger flare hot and bright in her chest. The truth, Mrs. Sullivan, is that I am 22 years old. I have never harmed a soul, and the only crime I have committed is trusting the wrong man. But I suppose that is enough to condemn a woman forever in this town. You were seen, Mrs. Sullivan began, but Josephine cut her off. I was seen having dinner with a man I believed intended to marry me, a man who claimed to love me, a man who, it turned out, was already married with a family back in Nevada. I was foolish and naive, but I was not ruined. The only thing ruined is my reputation, and that was destroyed by gossips who had nothing better to do than tear down a grieving woman. She did not wait for a response. She climbed the narrow stairs to her room and began packing her few possessions, a change of clothes, her mother's Bible, the daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. Everything she owned in the world fit into a single carpetbag. Tomorrow, she would start over. Tomorrow, she would begin rebuilding her life, one ledger entry at a time. She did not sleep well that night. Every sound made her worry she had imagined the entire encounter, that Levi Thornton would come to his senses and rescind his offer. But when dawn broke over Mojave, painting the desert sky in shades of gold and pink, she heard the sound of a wagon pulling up outside. The man waiting for her was perhaps 50, weathered and lean, with kind brown eyes and silver threading through his dark hair. "Miss Fletcher." "I am Miguel Santos, foreman of the Thornton Ranch. Mr. Thornton sent me to bring you home." Home. The word caught in Josephine's throat. She nodded, unable to speak, and let him help her into the wagon. As they rolled out of town, she did not look back. The Thornton Ranch lay 10 miles outside Mojave, nestled against the foothills where the desert met scrub-covered slopes. It was larger than Josephine had expected, with a sprawling main house, several outbuildings, a massive barn, and corrals that held at least 50 horses. Cattle dotted the distant hills, dark shapes against the tawny grass. Everything spoke of hard work and careful management. Miguel drove the wagon past the main house to a small cabin set slightly apart, shaded by a pair of cottonwood trees that must have been carefully cultivated in this harsh climate. "This was my place before I married," he explained as he helped her down. "Mr. Thornton had it cleaned up for you. It is not fancy, but it is solid." The cabin was indeed simple, one room with a bed, a table and chairs, a small stove, and a chest for her belongings. But it was clean and private, and after 3 months in Mrs. Sullivan's cramped, judging establishment, it looked like a palace. "It is perfect," Josephine said sincerely. "Thank you." "Mr. Thornton is in his office in the main house," Miguel said. "He asked that you join him there once you have settled in. Just come up to the house. The office is the first door on the left." Josephine took a few minutes to unpack her meager belongings and splash water on her face from the basin Miguel had filled. She changed into her other dress, which was slightly less worn, and tried to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. This was just bookkeeping. She had done her father's accounts for years. She could do this. The main house was built of adobe, thick walls designed to keep out the desert heat. She knocked on the front door, and Levi's voice called for her to enter. The office was a testament to organized chaos, papers stacked on every surface, ledgers piled on the floor, a desk buried under correspondence. Levi stood by the window, looking out over his land, but turned when she entered. In the clear morning light, she could see him better than she had in the dim saloon. He had a strong face, not handsome in the classical sense, but striking all hard angles and weathered skin, with those pale blue eyes that seemed to see too much. There was a scar along his jaw, white against his tanned skin, and his hands, when he gestured to the chaos around them, were calloused and scarred from hard work. "This is the disaster you have inherited," he said without preamble. 6 months of accounts that need sorting, bills that need paying, receipts that need filing. "I am a decent rancher, Miss Fletcher, but I am a terrible clerk." Josephine moved to the desk, picking up the nearest ledger. The entries were a mess, incomplete, sometimes illegible, with numbers that did not add up. "How have you managed to keep the ranch running?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Luck and stubbornness," Levi said dryly. "And Miguel, who has a better head for numbers than I do, though he would deny it. But we have been growing too fast for either of us to manage the books properly. I need someone who knows what they are doing." "I can fix this," Josephine said, more confident now that she could see the scope of the work. It was daunting, but not impossible. "It will take time, but I can sort it out." "That is what I am paying you for." He moved to the door, then paused. Miss Fletcher, there is something you should know. This town talks and they will talk about this, about you being here. I do not care, but I will not have my hands or their families made uncomfortable. I have spoken to Miguel and the other men. They understand that you are an employee, same as them, and you are to be treated with respect. If anyone gives you trouble, anyone, you come to me directly. Understood? Josephine nodded, something warm unfurling in her chest at his matter-of-fact protection. Understood, and Mr. Thornton, thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank me by getting my books in order, he said, but there was the faintest hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. I will leave you to it. The door closed behind him, and Josephine was alone with 6 months of chaos. She took a deep breath, pulled out the chair at the desk, and got to work. The first week passed in a blur of numbers and notations. Josephine worked from dawn until well past dark, slowly bringing order to the chaos of Levi's record-keeping. She found receipts stuffed in drawers, contracts filed under the wrong dates, payments that had been made but never recorded. It was like assembling a puzzle where half the pieces had been scattered across the county. She saw little of Levi during those first days. He was out with the hands from sunrise to sunset, working alongside them in a way that surprised her. She was used to men who considered physical labor beneath them, but Levi Thornton was not that kind of man. She would see him riding in at dusk, covered in dust and sweat, and he would stick his head into the office just long enough to ask if she needed anything before disappearing to clean up. Miguel's wife, Rosa, brought her lunch each day: fresh tortillas, beans, sometimes a piece of chicken or beef that made Josephine's mouth water. Rosa was a plump, cheerful woman who spoke little English, but her kindness needed no translation. She would set down the food, pat Josephine's shoulder, and smile before bustling away. On the 8th day, Josephine finally felt confident enough to approach Levi with her initial assessment. She found him in the barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal any day. He looked up when she entered, brushing hay from his shirt. I have gone through the last 6 months, she said, holding up a neat stack of papers. I have organized everything by date and category, reconciled all the accounts, and created a new system for filing receipts and contracts. You are actually doing better than you thought. You have a profit margin of nearly 15%, which is excellent for a ranch this size. But you were also overpaying 3 of your suppliers. I have drawn up new contracts for you to review. Levi took the papers, his eyebrows rising as he flipped through her neat columns of figures. This must have taken you all week. Most of it, Josephine admitted, but the hard part is done. From now on, it should only take a few hours each day to keep everything current. He looked at her, really looked at her, and Josephine felt suddenly aware of how close they were standing in the dim barn. You are very good at this, he said quietly. I told you I was. People tell me a lot of things. Most of it is nonsense. He handed the papers back to her. Draw up those new contracts, and Miss Fletcher, you have earned a day of rest. Take tomorrow. Explore the property or just sleep. You look exhausted. She was exhausted, she realized, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that came from work well done rather than worry and fear. Thank you. Levi, he said, if we are going to be working together, you might as well call me Levi. Mr. Thornton makes me feel like my father. Then you should call me Josephine. She hesitated. Or Josie. My mother used to call me Josie. Josie. He said it like he was testing the sound of it. Suits you better than Josephine, I think. She did not know what to say to that, so she simply nodded and left the barn, her heart beating unaccountably fast. That Sunday, Levi rode into Mojave for supplies, and he made a point of conducting his business with Josie's carefully drawn contracts in hand. At the feed store, when Hank Carlson tried to charge him the same inflated prices he had been paying, Levi calmly pointed out the discrepancy, and the fact that he could get better quality at a lower price from a supplier in Barstow. Hank grudgingly agreed to match the price. At the general store, Mrs. Henderson was helping another customer when Levi entered. She looked up, her expression cooling when she saw him. "Mr. Thornton, I heard you hired Jacob Fletcher's daughter." "I did." Levi set his list on the counter. "I need these supplies loaded into my wagon." "People are talking," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "About how it looks, a young woman living on your property, about what kind of woman would accept such an arrangement." Levi straightened, his pale eyes going cold. "Then people need to find something more productive to do with their time. Miss Fletcher is my employee, and where she lives is none of this town's concern. Now, are you going to fill my order, or do I need to take my business elsewhere, Mrs.?" Henderson flushed, but began gathering the items on his list. When she tried to charge him extra no-doubt retribution for his rudeness, Levi pulled out Josie's contract and pointed to the agreed-upon prices. "These are the terms we agreed to in writing 3 months ago. If you cannot honor them, I will happily pay the cancellation fee and find a more reliable supplier." The woman's mouth thinned, but she adjusted the prices. As Levi loaded his wagon, he could feel eyes on him from all over town. Let them look. Let them talk. He had built his ranch from nothing after walking away from his family's cattle empire in Texas, fleeing the suffocating weight of his father's expectations and his older brother's legacy. He had chosen Mojave because it was far from anything and anyone who knew the Thornton name. He had made this place succeed through his own sweat and determination, and he would be damned if he let a bunch of gossips dictate how he ran his business. The truth was, he had known exactly what he was doing when he hired Josie Fletcher. He had heard the stories. Everyone in Mojave had heard the stories about the gambler who had courted her and disappeared, about the dinner they had shared unchaperoned, about the ruin of her reputation. But Levi had also made inquiries, quiet ones, and everything he had learned told him the same thing. Josie Fletcher was guilty of nothing more than trusting the wrong man. The real crime, as far as he could see, was the way this town had turned on her in her grief. He had meant what he said about needing a bookkeeper. That part was entirely true. But he had also recognized in her face, that day in the saloon, the same desperate determination he had felt when he left Texas with nothing but his horse and his saddle. The look of someone who had lost everything and was fighting to survive. He knew what it cost to start over. If he could make that a little easier for her, well, that was just decent human behavior. What he had not expected was to find himself thinking about her at odd moments during his work day. Wondering if she had eaten lunch. Noticing the way the lamplight from the office windows glowed warm in the darkness when he rode in late. Looking forward to their brief conversations about accounts and contracts with an anticipation that had nothing to do with business. This was dangerous territory, he knew. She was his employee, dependent on him for her livelihood. The last thing he wanted was to make her uncomfortable or to abuse the power he held over her situation. So he kept his distance, kept their interactions professional, and tried very hard not to notice the way her dark hair escaped its pins when she worked, or how her eyes lit up when she solved a particularly tangled accounting problem. Back at the ranch, he found Josie in the office, despite his instructions to take the day off. She looked up guiltily when he entered with supplies. "I know you said to rest," she said quickly, "but I found another set of ledgers in the back cupboard, and I wanted to make sure they were current." "Levi, have you looked at these? These are from the previous owner." He set down the crate he was carrying and moved to look over her shoulder. "Morrison's records. I assumed those were useless. They are not useless at all." Look, he tracked water sources across the entire property, every spring and creek bed. And here, he has notes about which pastures produce the best grazing in different seasons. This is valuable information. Levi leaned closer, studying the cramped handwriting. Josie smelled faintly of soap and paper and something else, something soft and feminine that made his throat tight. He forced himself to focus on the ledger. I will be damned. I have been trying to figure out the water situation for months. This would have saved me a lot of trouble. There is more. She flipped pages, her excitement palpable. He kept breeding records for the horses, going back 10 years. You could use this to plan your breeding program, see which bloodlines produce the best results. You understand horse breeding. He could not keep the surprise from his voice. My father raised horses before he... She stopped, her expression closing off. Before he lost everything, I grew up around them. Levi had heard that too in his inquiries. Jacob Fletcher had been a successful horse breeder once, before his wife died and he turned to gambling and drink. Do you ride? He asked. I used to. I have not been on a horse in years. An idea formed in his mind, probably a terrible idea, but he found himself speaking before he could talk himself out of it. Come with me tomorrow. I am riding out to the northern pastures to check on the herd. You could see the springs Morrison marked, help me correlate his maps with the actual land, and there is a gentle mare in the barn that needs exercising. Josie looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his face. Are you sure? I would not want to slow you down. You would not. And it would be useful to have someone who can actually read Morrison's handwriting. Mine is bad enough, but his is practically code. He straightened, putting a careful distance between them. Think about it. We would leave at dawn. He left before she could answer, before he could do something foolish like tell her that he just wanted her company, that the prospect of a day riding the range with her beside him seemed infinitely more appealing than it should. Josie sat alone in the office after he left, her heart racing. A day riding with Levi, just the two of them on the open range. It was probably improper. It would certainly give the gossips more ammunition. But God help her, she wanted to go. She wanted to feel a horse beneath her again. Wanted to see the land that was slowly becoming familiar to her. Wanted to spend time with the man who had given her back her dignity when everyone else had stripped it away. She was not naive enough to pretend she did not know what was happening. She was drawn to Levi Thornton in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. He was everything Daniel Turner had pretended to be: honest, hardworking, decent. He looked at her like she was a person, not a scandal. He trusted her with his business, valued her skills, protected her without making her feel weak. And he was handsome in that rough, weathered way of men who spent their lives outdoors. She noticed things she should not notice: the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he worked, the rare smile that softened his hard face, the surprising gentleness in his scarred hands when he handled the horses. But he was also her employer, and she was still recovering from the disaster of her last romantic entanglement. The smart thing would be to keep her distance, maintain a professional relationship, protect her heart. Josie had never been particularly good at doing the smart thing. The next morning, she was waiting by the barn when Levi let out two saddled horses. One was a leggy bay gelding, clearly his regular mount. The other was a dappled gray mare with a kind eye and a gentle demeanor. Josie felt a lump form in her throat as she approached the mare, running her hand down the soft nose. This is Dulce, Levi said. Rosa named her. She is sweet-tempered and steady. Miguel's daughters ride her sometimes. Josie mounted with only a little awkwardness. It had been 4 years since she last sat a horse, but the skill came back quickly. Levi swung into his own saddle with the easy grace of someone who had been born in one, and they set off toward the rising sun. The ride was glorious. The morning air was still cool, the desert coming alive with birdsong and the rustle of small creatures in the brush. They followed a trail that climbed into the foothills, leaving the ranch buildings behind. Levi rode slightly ahead, pointing out landmarks and boundaries, his voice low and unhurried. He loved this land, Josie realized. It was there in every word, every gesture. "Why Mojave?" she asked as they paused to let the horses drink from a spring, one of the ones marked on Morrison's map. "You could have ranched anywhere. Why here?" Levi was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon. "I needed to be somewhere no one knew me," he finally said. "Somewhere I could build something that was mine, not my family's. Texas felt too small, too crowded with expectations. Out here, a man can be whoever he makes himself." "I understand that," Josie said softly. "Wanting to be seen for who you are, not who people think you are." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "You are not ruined, Josie. I hope you know that. What happened to you, that was not your fault. That gambler was a bastard and a liar, and the people in town who treated you like you had done something wrong are fools." Tears stung her eyes, sudden and hot. No one had said that to her. No one had told her that she was not to blame, that she had not deserved what happened. "Thank you," she whispered. "You do not know how much I needed to hear that. I mean it." He dismounted, moving to stand beside her horse. "You are smart and capable and braver than you give yourself credit for. Any man would be lucky to earn your trust." The moment stretched between them, charged with something unnamed. Josie knew she should look away, should break the spell, but she could not. She could not stop looking at him, at the honesty in his face, at the way he stood with his hand on her horse's neck like he was anchoring himself. "Levi," she began, not knowing what she was going to say, but a distant sound made them both turn. Riders, several of them, heading their direction. Levi's posture changed instantly, going from open to guarded. "That is Harlan Cross and his boys," he said quietly. "He runs the cattle operation south of here. We are on good terms, but he is a talker. Let me handle this." The riders approached, 5 men in dusty trail clothes. The one in front was perhaps 60, with a bristling white beard and shrewd eyes. "Thornton," he called out cheerfully. "Fancy meeting you out here, and with company, I see. Cross." Levi's voice was carefully neutral. "We are surveying water sources. This is Josephine Fletcher, my bookkeeper." Harlan Cross's bushy eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "Your bookkeeper? Well now, that is interesting." His gaze swept over Josie in a way that made her want to pull her jacket closed, even though she was perfectly decent. "I heard you hired Jacob Fletcher's girl, caused quite a stir in town." "Miss Fletcher's qualifications are excellent," Levi said evenly. "My accounts have never been in better order." "I am sure they have not." Cross's tone suggested he was talking about something other than bookkeeping. "Still, people talk. You might want to consider how it looks, the two of you out here alone." Levi's voice went cold. "I do not recall asking for your opinion on how I run my ranch or who I employ. Now, if you will excuse us, we have work to do." Cross held up his hands in mock surrender, but there was something calculating in his eyes. "No offense meant, Thornton, just friendly advice. A man's reputation is important in these parts. So is minding your own business." The standoff lasted another moment before Cross laughed, though it did not reach his eyes. "Fair enough. Come on, boys." He wheeled his horse around and the group rode off, though Josie could see them talking amongst themselves, looking back. "I am sorry," she said once they were out of earshot. "I should not have come. Now there will be more talk. Let them talk." But Levi's jaw was tight, and she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Cross is a blowhard. He has been trying to buy my land for 2 years, and he cannot stand that I keep refusing him. He will use any excuse to make trouble. They continued their survey, but the easy companionship of the morning had been broken. When they returned to the ranch in late afternoon, Levi was quiet and distant, and Josie felt a sharp pang of loss for what might have been. Over the next 2 weeks, Josie threw herself into work, trying to ignore the way her feelings for Levi continued to grow despite her best efforts. She reorganized the entire office filing system, set up a new method for tracking cattle sales, and even helped negotiate better shipping rates with the railroad agent. The ranch ran more smoothly than it ever had, and Levi's profit margins continued to climb. But he was pulling away from her. She could feel it. Their conversations grew brief and professional. He stopped sticking his head into the office at the end of the day. He took his meals with Miguel and the hands instead of occasionally sharing supper with her on the porch of the main house, as he had been doing. She understood why. The encounter with Harlan Cross had reminded them both of the reality of their situation. No matter how proper their relationship, no matter that they had never done anything inappropriate, the world would see what it wanted to see. And Levi was trying to protect both of them from more scandal. But understanding did not make it hurt less. Rosa noticed. She began staying longer when she brought lunch, chattering in Spanish that Josie was slowly learning to understand. She gathered that Rosa was not happy with Levi, that she thought men were fools, and that Josie needed to eat more. The kindness nearly undid her. On a Wednesday afternoon, nearly 3 weeks after the ride to the northern pastures, Josie was working on the quarterly tax calculations when she heard raised voices outside. She looked up to see a well-dressed man on a fine black horse arguing with Levi in the yard. The stranger was younger than Levi, perhaps 25, with the same dark hair and strong jaw. But where Levi's face was weathered and lived in, this man's was smoother, more classically handsome. "You cannot just walk away from the family," the stranger was shouting. "Father is getting old, Levi. The ranch needs you." "The ranch has you and Thomas," Levi said, his voice hard. "That was always the plan. I was never meant to inherit. Plans change. Thomas died 2 years ago. You are the heir now, whether you like it or not." Josie felt her stomach drop. "Thomas? Dead." She watched Levi's face go white beneath his tan. "Thomas is dead. Did you not get any of our letters?" The young man's anger faded to something like concern. "We have been trying to reach you for months. He got thrown from a horse, hit his head. He lingered for a week, but he never woke up." Levi turned away, his shoulders rigid. "I am sorry. I did not know, but it does not change anything, Wesley. I left Texas for good reason. I am not coming back. Father sent me to bring you home." Wesley's voice was pleading now. "You have responsibilities, Levi. You cannot just pretend you are not a Thornton. Watch me." Wesley's gaze swept the ranch, landing on Josie watching from the office window. "Is that why you are staying? Some woman. Father said you always did let sentiment cloud your judgment." Levi's hand shot out, grabbing Wesley's shirt. "You will speak respectfully or you will leave. She is my employee, nothing more." Nothing more. The words hit Josie like a physical blow. She knew it was true, knew it had to be true, but hearing him say it with such finality made something crack inside her chest. Wesley pulled free, straightening his shirt. "Fine, I will leave. But this is not over, Levi. Father is not going to let you hide out here forever." He mounted his horse and rode off without another word. Levi stood in the yard for a long moment, his back to the house. Then, without looking at the office, he strode toward the barn. A few minutes later, Josie heard hoofbeats as he galloped away. He did not return until after dark. Josie was still in the office, working by lamplight, when she heard him come in. He appeared in the doorway, covered in dust and looking exhausted. "You should not be working this late," he said quietly. "Neither should you." She set down her pen. I am sorry about your brother." He leaned against the doorframe, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked defeated. "I did not know. I should have known. I stopped reading their letters months ago. I thought it was all the same message: come home, do your duty, stop being selfish. You are allowed to live your own life." "Am I?" The question sounded genuinely confused. "I am the last Thornton son now. My father built an empire in Texas, 40,000 acres, the biggest cattle operation in 3 counties. And I walked away from it to run a nothing ranch in the desert because I could not stand the weight of being a Thornton heir." Josie stood and moved closer, but not too close. "This is not a nothing ranch. You have built something here, something good. You did it yourself with your own hands and your own choices. That matters. Does it, when my family needs me, when I have responsibilities I am ignoring?" "What do you want, Levi?" She made him look at her. "Not what your father wants, not what Wesley wants. What do you want?" He stared at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. "I want things I have no right to want," he said hoarsely. "I want to keep pretending that I am just a rancher in Mojave, that I do not have a legacy waiting for me in Texas. I want to stop thinking about how the whole town believes you are a scandal and I am a fool for hiring you. I want to stop lying to myself about how I feel when I look at you." The air between them felt electric. Josie could barely breathe. "How do you feel when you look at me?" "Like I am drowning." He took a step toward her, then stopped himself. "Like I am finally breathing for the first time. Like I want to punch every person in Mojave who whispered about you. Like I would give up everything in Texas just to see you smile." He ran a hand through his hair, laughing bitterly. "See, no right at all. Levi." She closed the distance between them, her hand finding his. "You have every right, because I feel the same way." His eyes widened. "Josie, you do not have to. I am not asking you to say that because I am your employer. I would never, I know that. I am saying it because it is true." Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "I have been trying not to feel this way, trying to be professional and sensible, but I cannot help it. You gave me back my life when I had nothing left. You believed in me when no one else would. You look at me like I am worth something. How am I supposed to not fall in love with you?" The confession hung between them, raw and terrifying. Then Levi's hand came up to cup her face, his calloused thumb brushing her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "I do not deserve you," he whispered. "That is not for you to decide." He kissed her then, soft and searching, like he was asking a question. Josie answered by wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, months of longing and denial pouring into it. His other hand found her waist, drawing her against him, and Josie felt like she was coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Levi rested his forehead against hers. "This is going to make the gossip worse," he said, but he was smiling. "I do not care. Your reputation is already ruined according to Mojave, and you know what? I am done caring what they think. I spent 3 months letting their whispers make me feel small and ashamed, but I have nothing to be ashamed of. Neither do you. If they want to talk, let them talk." He laughed, the sound full of relief and joy. "You are extraordinary, Josie Fletcher. You are not so bad yourself, Levi Thornton." They stood there in the lamplight, holding each other, and for the first time in months, Josie felt truly happy. The next morning, Levi made his intentions clear to everyone on the ranch. He called the hands together at breakfast and announced, with Josie standing beside him, that they were courting. Miguel grinned broadly. Rosa actually clapped her hands. The other men offered congratulations and seemed genuinely pleased. If any of them had concerns about the propriety of the situation, they kept it to themselves. "I know this town has said ugly things about Miss Fletcher," Levi told them. If any man has a problem with our relationship, he can collect his pay and ride out. But I will not tolerate disrespect toward the woman I intend to marry. Intend to marry. Josie felt her cheeks flush with happiness. One of the younger hands, a boy named Charlie, spoke up. Begging your pardon, Mr. Thornton, but I think any man with eyes can see you are crazy about each other. It is about time you did something about it. That earned a round of laughter and broke the tension. The hands went back to their breakfasts, talking among themselves, and Levi squeezed Josie's hand. Well, he said, that went better than expected. Did you mean it? She asked quietly. About marrying me, every word. I know it is fast, and I know we should probably take more time, but Josie, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to stand beside you and dare anyone in this whole damn territory to say a word against you. Yes, she said simply. My answer is yes. The news reached Mojave by midday. Someone had seen Levi and Josie riding together again, this time holding hands, clearly courting. By evening, the entire town was buzzing. Some were scandalized, others were surprised. A very few were pleased. Reverend Matthews was in the first category. He appeared at the ranch 2 days later, his face set in disapproving lines, ready to counsel Levi about the error of his ways. He left 20 minutes later, tight-lipped and angry, after Levi politely but firmly told him that his opinion was neither requested nor welcome, and that if the good Reverend could not find it in his Christian heart to be happy for them, he could stay off Thornton land. Harlan Cross, predictably, had plenty to say to anyone who would listen about how Levi Thornton had been taken in by a conniving woman, how he was ruining his reputation, how it would end badly. He made the mistake of saying some of this within earshot of Miguel, who informed him in colorful Spanish and broken English exactly what he could do with his opinions. But there were surprising allies too. Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundry, stopped Josie on her next trip to town and pressed a package into her hands, a beautiful embroidered shawl. For your wedding, she said in her accented English. You are a good girl. That man is lucky. Tommy from the saloon, of all people, tipped his hat to them when they passed. Thornton, he said. Miss Fletcher, best wishes to you both. Even Mrs. Sullivan, when Josie returned to retrieve a box of books she had left behind, unbent enough to say, I suppose you have done well for yourself. Try to be worthy of it. It was not exactly a blessing, but it was something. The real test came on Sunday, when Levi insisted they attend church together. Josie had not set foot in the church since her father's funeral, and she was terrified. But Levi held her hand as they walked down the aisle, and when people stared, he stared right back, daring them to say a word. They sat in the third pew, Levi's hand never leaving hers. Reverend Matthews preached a sermon about redemption that was clearly aimed at them, full of talk about repentance and the dangers of scandal. Levi sat through it with a patient expression, and when it was over, he stood and led Josie out, stopping to shake hands with several ranchers who had done business with him. Harlan Cross was holding court on the church steps, surrounded by his cronies. Thornton, he called out as they passed. I hear your brother died. That makes you heir to the Texas Thornton empire, does it not? Lot of responsibility for a man who is busy courting scandal in California. Levi stopped, his jaw tightening. My family situation is none of your concern, Cross. Just saying, it seems a waste for you to be here playing house when you have got a fortune waiting in Texas, unless the woman is reason enough to throw away your birthright. That woman, Levi said quietly, dangerously, is worth 100 fortunes. And if you cannot speak of her with respect, you and I are going to have a problem, Cross sneered. She already, he did not get to finish the sentence. Levi's fist connected with his jaw with a crack that echoed off the church walls. Cross went down hard, blood streaming from his split lip. His men started forward, but Miguel and 3 of the Thornton hands materialized from the crowd, and the confrontation ended before it could escalate. "You broke my tooth," Cross howled from the ground. "You are lucky it was just a tooth." Levi flexed his hand, wincing. "The next time you want to spread lies about Miss Fletcher, remember this moment. I am done being polite about defending her honor." He took Josie's hand again and they walked away, leaving Cross cursing on the church steps. Josie was shaking, torn between horror at the violence and a fierce, primitive satisfaction that Levi had defended her so absolutely. "That was foolish," she said when they were out of earshot. "Probably. He could have shot you. He is too much of a coward." Levi looked at his reddening knuckles. "I have wanted to hit him for months anyway. This was just a good excuse." Despite everything, Josie laughed. "What am I going to do with you? Marry me, I hope." He stopped walking and turned to face her. Right there in the middle of the street, in full view of anyone watching, he pulled her close and kissed her thoroughly. When he finally released her, Josie was dizzy. "People are staring," she managed. "Let them. I want everyone in this town to know that you are mine and I am yours, and I do not give a damn what any of them think about it." That evening, as they sat on the porch of the main house watching the sun set over the desert, Josie leaned against his shoulder and said, "What about Texas?" "What about it? Your brother, your father, the ranch. Wesley said you have responsibilities." Levi was quiet for a long moment. "I have responsibilities here too, to the men who work for me, to this land, to you." He tilted her face up to look at him. "I am not going back to Texas, Josie. This is my home now. But if you are the heir, then my father will have to find someone else to carry on the legacy. Wesley can do it, or he can hire a manager. But I am not going back to being the person I was in Texas, the dutiful son, the heir apparent, the man everyone expected me to be instead of the man I wanted to be. I do not want to be the reason you give up your family. You are not. I gave up on them long before I met you. Or maybe they gave up on me, I am not sure which came first." He kissed the top of her head. "I choose this life, Josie. I choose you. Everything else is just noise." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe they could build a life here, together, without the weight of his family's expectations and the town's judgment crushing them. But she also knew that life rarely made things that simple. 2 weeks later, as October brought slightly cooler weather to the Mojave Desert, they were married in the small church with Miguel and Rosa as witnesses. Reverend Matthews had refused to perform the ceremony, so they hired a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through. The service was simple and brief. Josie wore her mother's best dress, altered to fit. Levi wore a new suit he had bought in town, though he looked distinctly uncomfortable in it. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Levi kissed her with such tenderness that Josie felt tears prick her eyes. They were really doing this. They were really building a life together. The ranch hands threw them a celebration. That evening Miguel roasted a pig. Rosa made enough food to feed an army, and someone produced a fiddle. They danced in the yard under the stars, and for the first time since her father died, Josie felt like she belonged somewhere. That night, in the main house that was now truly their home, Levi carried her over the threshold and set her down gently in their bedroom. "I love you, Josephine Thornton," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you know it." "I love you too," she whispered. "My stubborn, wonderful cowboy." He laughed and kissed her, and they spent their wedding night learning each other, building something beautiful and new from the ruins of their separate pasts. The next month brought challenges. A drought settled over the desert, drying up some of the smaller water sources. Cattle prices dropped. Harlan Cross continued to spread rumors and make trouble where he could. But Josie and Levi faced it all together, and somehow that made it bearable. Josie proved herself invaluable not just as a bookkeeper, but as a partner. She helped negotiate new contracts, found creative solutions to cash flow problems, and even learned to treat minor injuries and illnesses among the hands when the nearest doctor was a day's ride away. The men came to respect her not just as the boss's wife, but as a capable woman in her own right. And slowly, gradually, the town began to change its mind about Josie Thornton. It started with practical things when she kept the books for the ranch so well that Levi always paid his bills on time and in full. Merchants began to appreciate her. When she helped Mrs. Chen's daughter with her schoolwork during a trip to town, word spread that she was kind and educated. When she attended church every Sunday, sitting proudly at Levi's side, people had to admit she did not seem like a fallen woman. It helped that Levi never wavered in his defense of her. If anyone spoke against her in his hearing, they faced his cold wrath. If anyone refused to do business with them because of her, he took his money elsewhere and made sure everyone knew why. He was so absolutely certain of her worth that eventually, people began to wonder if they had been wrong about her all along. In December, Wesley Thornton returned. Josie looked up from the books one afternoon to see him riding into the yard, alone this time. Her stomach clenched with worry, but when Levi came out to meet him, Wesley dismounted and extended his hand. "I am not here to fight," he said. "I came to apologize, and to talk if you will let me." They talked for 2 hours in Levi's office, voices low but not angry. When Wesley finally emerged, he sought out Josie on the porch. "I am sorry for what I said when I was here before," he told her. "I was angry and I spoke out of turn. Levi has told me what really happened with that gambler and how this town treated you. You did not deserve that." "Thank you," Josie said, surprised and touched. "He is happy here," Wesley continued, looking back at the office where Levi was still working. "I have never seen him this settled, this sure of himself. That is because of you. He makes me happy too." Wesley nodded slowly. "Father is not going to let this go. He is a stubborn man and he has his heart set on Levi coming home, but I wanted you to know that I am not going to be part of that pressure anymore. What Levi has here, what you have together, is worth more than all the land in Texas." He left the next morning, but the visit had changed something. Levi was quieter than usual, thoughtful. "Finally, that evening," he said, "Wesley offered to buy out my share of the Texas ranch. Father wants to keep it in the family, but Wesley could run it himself if he had the capital. The land is worth a fortune." Josie's heart sank. "Are you considering selling?" "I am considering using the money to expand here. We could buy out the Morrison neighbors, the ones struggling to make ends meet, double our range, build this into something that could support our children and their children. Our children." The casual way he said it made her heart flutter. They had not talked about children yet, though she desperately wanted them. "I could also consider splitting my time," Levi continued slowly, clearly working through the idea as he spoke. "Spending part of the year in Texas, helping Wesley get established, teaching him what I know about ranching. It would be hard, but it might be the right thing to do." "No," Josie said firmly. He looked at her in surprise. "Levi, you left Texas for good reasons. Your father pushed you to be someone you were not. Your brother's death does not erase that. If you go back, even part-time, you will get pulled back into that life. I do not want to lose you to the Thornton empire." "You would not lose me, would I not? How long before a few months turns into 6 months, then 8, then year-round? How long before your father convinces you that duty matters more than happiness?" She took his hands, making him look at her. "Sell your share if you want. Help Wesley financially. But do not go back, Levi. Please. This is our home. This is our life. Do not let them take that from us." He pulled her close, holding her tight. "You are right," he said after a long moment. "You are absolutely right. Texas is my past. You are my future. I will write to Wesley tomorrow and tell him I will sell my share, but that is the end of my involvement." She felt the tension drain from her body. "Thank you. For what? For choosing me, for choosing us." He kissed her softly. "Every time, Josie, I will choose you every time." Christmas came, and with it, an unexpected gift. Mrs. Henderson from the general store appeared at the ranch with her daughter in tow, looking embarrassed. Mrs. Thornton," she corrected herself. "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you after your father passed. It was unkind and it was wrong. I let gossip cloud my judgment, and I am sorry." Josie was so shocked she could barely speak. "I thank you. I appreciate that. I also wanted to ask if you might consider helping my daughter with her numbers. She is struggling with her schoolwork, and I heard you are quite good with figures. I would pay you, of course." It was a peace offering, and Josie recognized it as such. "I would be happy to help. And you do not need to pay me." Word of Mrs. Henderson's apology spread, and suddenly other people found reasons to visit the ranch. Some came with business. Others came with apologies. A few came simply to satisfy their curiosity about the woman who had captured Levi Thornton's heart. Josie received them all with grace, never mentioning the months of cold shoulders and whispered insults. "You are a better person than I am," Levi said one evening after a particularly awkward visit from one of the town council members who had been especially vocal about Josie being a bad influence. "I want to throw half of these people off my land. What would that accomplish? They are trying, Levi. Let them try." He shook his head in admiration. "How did I get so lucky? I ask myself the same thing every day." In February, Josie realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure, then another week gathering the courage to tell Levi. Finally, one evening after supper, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said softly. His eyes went wide. "A baby? Josie, are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor. Rosa says she can tell. She says I have the look." Levi let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to Mojave. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with tears. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" "Happy, Josie. I am terrified and thrilled and more happy than I thought was possible." He kissed her deeply. "You are going to be an amazing mother, and you will be an amazing father." They told the ranch hands the next day, and Rosa immediately took charge, insisting that Josie should not be doing heavy work, should be eating more, should be resting in the afternoons. Levi hovered like a worried hen, and Josie finally had to sit him down and remind him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time, and she was perfectly capable of continuing her work. "But what if something happens?" he asked, his fear plain. "Then we will deal with it. Together." "But Levi, I am healthy and strong, and everything is going to be fine." He tried to believe her. Mostly he succeeded. The pregnancy progressed normally through the spring and into the summer. Josie continued to keep the books, though she did slow down on some of the more physical tasks. The ranch continued to prosper. The sale of Levi's Texas share had provided capital for expansion, and they were now negotiating to buy the neighboring property. In June, word came from Texas that Levi's father had passed away in his sleep. Wesley sent a letter full of grief and relief in equal measure, saying that their father had finally found peace. He did not ask Levi to come home for the funeral, understanding that chapter of Levi's life was closed. Levi was quieter than usual for a few days, processing complicated emotions about a man he had loved and resented in equal measure. Josie held him when he needed to be held, gave him space when he needed to be alone, and listened when he needed to talk. Eventually, he came back to himself, sadder but also somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. "I wish things had been different between us," he told Josie one night. "I wish he could have accepted my choices. I wish he could have met our child." "I am sorry you did not get that resolution," she said softly. "Me too. But I do not regret the life I chose, even if it meant losing him." Their daughter was born in late September of 1879, during the first cool evening after a long, hot summer. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Levi, pacing outside the bedroom while Rosa and the midwife worked, thought he might go mad with worry. But when he finally heard the baby's first cry, strong and angry, he nearly collapsed with relief. Rosa emerged, beaming. "You have a daughter and your wife is well. Come meet her." Josie lay exhausted in the bed, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, but she was smiling. In her arms was a tiny, red-faced creature with a shock of dark hair and her father's pale blue eyes. "Say hello to your daughter," Josie said softly. Levi approached slowly, almost reverently. He had held calves and foals, had tended injured animals, but nothing had prepared him for the feeling of cradling his own child. She was so small, so perfect, so utterly dependent on them. "What should we name her?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I was thinking Mary," Josie said. "After my mother, Mary." Levi tested the name. "Mary Elizabeth Thornton, I like that." The baby wrapped her tiny hand around Levi's finger, and he felt something in his chest crack open. "Hello, Mary," he whispered. "I am your father, and I promise you I am going to do everything in my power to give you a better life than I had. You will never have to be anyone but yourself. You will never have to choose between your family and your happiness. I swear it." Josie reached up and took his free hand. "We will give her that together." The next year passed in a blur of sleepless nights and exhausted days and more joy than either of them had known was possible. Mary was a colicky baby at first, crying for hours every evening, but she eventually settled into a routine. She had her father's stubborn streak and her mother's keen intelligence, and both parents were hopelessly devoted to her. The ranch continued to thrive. They successfully bought the neighboring property and hired more hands. Josie managed the expansion with her usual skill, and even with a baby to care for, she kept the books in perfect order. They built an addition onto the main house, creating a proper nursery and more living space. The town of Mojave had fully accepted them by now. When they came to church on Sundays, Josie carrying Mary in her arms, people smiled and greeted them warmly. Mrs. Henderson had become something like a friend, often stopping by the ranch to visit and bring gifts for the baby. Even Harlan Cross, after Levi outbid him for a contract to supply cattle to the army, had grudgingly developed a respect for them, though he would never admit it aloud. On their second wedding anniversary, Levi took Josie on a picnic to the northern pastures where he had first told her he loved her. They left Mary with Rosa, who adored the baby, and rode out at dawn. "You remember the first time we came here?" Levi asked as they sat on a blanket, watching the sun rise over the desert. "When Cross and his men found us." "I remember thinking my life was over," Josie said. "That the scandal would never end, that I would never be free of it. And now," she looked at him, at this man who had given her back her life, who had stood by her when no one else would, who had loved her so absolutely that the whole town had been forced to see her differently. "Now I think I am the luckiest woman alive." "Funny," he said, pulling her close. "I was just thinking the same thing about myself." They made love there on the blanket, slow and tender, with the desert blooming around them. It was different now than it had been in those first passionate months, deeper, richer, built on a foundation of trust and partnership that had been tested and proven strong. Afterwards, lying in his arms, Josie said, "I think I might be pregnant again." Levi propped himself up on one elbow, eyes wide. "Really? I am not certain yet, but I think so. Rosa says she can tell. Rosa says a lot of things. Rosa has been right about everything so far." He laughed and kissed her. "Then I suppose we are going to need an even bigger house." Their son was born the following spring, an easy birth compared to Mary's. He was big and healthy, with his mother's dark hair and a temperament so calm it was almost unsettling after Mary's dramatic infancy. They named him Lucas, after no one in particular, just because they liked the name. Levi proved to be just as devoted a father as he had been a husband. He carved toys for his children, took Mary riding as soon as she was old enough to sit a horse, read to them every evening before bed. He was patient and kind, and never once raised his voice in anger, determined to be the father his own had never been. The years rolled by, filled with the ordinary joys and sorrows of life. They expanded the ranch twice more, making the Thornton spread one of the most successful operations in California. They weathered droughts and market crashes and difficult seasons. They lost hands to accidents and old age and saw new young men hired to replace them. They watched their children grow. Mary proved to have her father's way with horses and her mother's head for numbers. By the time she was 10, she was helping with the breeding records and riding fence lines with the hands. Lucas was quieter, more studious, fascinated by the law and books. They were different as night and day, but fiercely devoted to each other. In 1887, when Mary was 8 and Lucas was 6, Josie gave birth to another daughter whom they named Catherine. She was the image of her mother, with the same dark hair and warm eyes, but she had her father's intensity, fixing people with a stare that seemed to see right through them. The town of Mojave grew around them. The railroad brought more people, more business. New buildings went up. The streets were improved. But through it all, the Thorntons remained a fixture respected, admired, and finally, no longer the subject of gossip. On a hot July day in 1890, 12 years after Levi had first hired Josie as his bookkeeper, they stood together on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard. Mary was teaching Lucas to rope, while little Catherine toddled after them, demanding to be included. "Do you ever regret it?" Josie asked softly. "Giving up Texas, giving up your family's legacy?" Levi pulled her close, his arm around her waist. "Not for a single second. This is my legacy." He gestured to the ranch, the children, the life they had built together. A good woman who took a chance on a stubborn cowboy. 3 healthy children who will never doubt they are loved. A ranch that we made profitable through hard work and smart decisions. A town that finally learned to judge people by their character instead of gossip. This is worth more than all the land in Texas. "I love you," Josie said, leaning into his strength. "I loved you from the moment you stood up in that saloon and offered me a job. I loved you when you dared the whole town to talk. I loved you when you chose me over your family. And I will love you until the day I die. And beyond," Levi said, kissing her temple, "I will love you beyond that." They stood there as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. 2 people who had been broken by life and had found healing in each other, who had built something beautiful from the ruins of their pasts. The whole town had called her ruined once. The cowboy had hired her as a bookkeeper and dared them to talk. And in the end, love had proven stronger than scandal, stronger than gossip, stronger than anything the world could throw at them. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Mary ran up to the porch, breathless and laughing. "Papa, I finally did it. I roped the post on my first try." Levi swept her up in his arms, spinning her around. "That is my girl. I knew you could do it." Lucas and Catherine followed, clamoring for attention, and the evening dissolved into the cheerful chaos of family life. Later, after the children were in bed, Levi and Josie sat together in the office where she still kept the books, looking over the records of another profitable year. "We did well," Josie said, closing the ledger with satisfaction. "Better than last year." "We always do well when you are managing things." Levi pulled her into his lap, despite her half-hearted protests about needing to work. "You know, I was thinking, Mary is going to need her own horse soon. A good one. And Lucas mentioned wanting to visit the city, see the museums and libraries. We could afford to take a trip, maybe to San Francisco. Give the children some broader experiences." "You are getting soft in your old age," Josie teased. She was 34 now, Levi 36, but they both felt younger than they had in those desperate early days. "I prefer to think of it as being a good father. You are the best father," she kissed him softly, "and the best husband, and the best partner I could have asked for. I had a good example to follow. You showed me what it means to be strong when everything falls apart. To keep fighting when everyone has given up on you. To rebuild yourself from nothing. I would not be half the man I am without you. We made each other," Josie said. "We took two broken people and built something whole." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of wind through the cottonwoods, the soft breathing of their children asleep in their beds. It was not the life either of them had expected. It was so much better. In the years that followed, the Thornton children grew into remarkable young adults. Mary eventually took over much of the daily ranch operations, proving herself as capable as any man. Lucas went east to study law at university, then returned to set up a practice in Mojave, becoming the town's most respected lawyer. Catherine, to everyone's surprise, developed a talent for medicine and became a nurse, working with the town doctor and eventually establishing a small clinic. Levi and Josie grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced hardships: a fire that destroyed one of the barns, a bout of illness that nearly took Levi, the heartbreak of a miscarriage late in life. But they faced everything together, and they never once doubted their choice to build a life in Mojave, to stand against the gossip and the judgment, to love each other openly and without apology. When Mary married at 23, it was to a good man from a neighboring ranch, someone who respected her intelligence and her capabilities. The wedding was held at the Thornton Ranch, and it seemed like the entire town turned out to celebrate. Mrs. Henderson, elderly now but still sharp, approached Josie during the reception. "I remember when you first came to Mojave," she said quietly. "I remember the things people said about you, the things I said about you. I have spent 20 years being grateful that you were a better person than I was, that you forgave us our smallness. We all make mistakes," Josie said gently. "What matters is how we grow from them. Your daughter is a fine young woman. You and Mr. Thornton have built something remarkable here. I am honored to have witnessed it." That night, after the guests had gone home and the ranch had settled into sleep, Levi and Josie walked hand in hand through the property, just as they had done so many times over the years. "Do you think she will be happy?" Josie asked, thinking of Mary embarking on her own married life. "I think she has learned from the best example," Levi said. "She knows what real love looks like. She knows that marriage is partnership, not ownership. She knows how to stand up for herself and what she believes in. You taught her all of that. We taught her, together." They stopped at the small cabin where Josie had first lived when she came to the ranch, now used for storage. "Do you remember the first night you stayed here?" Levi asked. "How scared you were. How brave you had to be just to accept the job." "I remember thinking I had nothing left to lose," Josie said. "I remember feeling like my life was over at 22, and then you offered me a second chance. We offered each other a second chance." He turned to face her, his weathered hands cupping her face with the same gentleness he had shown that first night he kissed her. "I was running from my past, trying to escape my family's expectations, convinced I would spend my life alone. And then you walked into that saloon and everything changed." "I love you," Josie said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she said them. "I will always love you. And I will always love you," Levi replied. "My brave, brilliant, beautiful Josie. The woman who refused to be ruined. The woman who taught me what it means to truly live." They kissed under the stars, two people who had found each other in the darkest moments of their lives and had built something bright and beautiful together. And as they walked back to the house, back to the life they had created, Josie thought about all the years behind them and all the years still to come. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she had made the right choice. The cowboy had hired her as a bookkeeper and dared the town to talk. She had dared to hope again, dared to love again, dared to believe in second chances. And together, they had proven that sometimes, the best love stories are the ones that begin in the darkest places, the ones that require courage and stubbornness, and an absolute refusal to let the world define who you are. Years later, when Levi passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Josie held his hand and whispered all the things they had said to each other 1,000 times before. She thanked him for seeing her when she was invisible, for believing in her when no one else would, for loving her so completely that it had transformed not just her life but the life of everyone around them. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren, still keeping the books for the ranch that Mary now ran with her husband. And when her time came, she went peacefully, knowing that she had lived a full life, a good life, a life worth living. The town of Mojave never forgot the Thorntons. Their story became local legend, the ruined woman and the stubborn cowboy who had dared to build a life together, who had refused to let scandal and judgment define them, who had loved each other so fiercely that even death could not diminish it. Their ranch continued to prosper under Mary's management, then under her children's, a testament to what could be built through hard work, smart management, and unwavering partnership. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the desert sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the people of Mojave would look toward the Thornton ranch and remember the woman who had walked into town with nothing but her dignity and her skill with numbers, and the man who had taken one look at her and seen not scandal but strength, not ruin but resilience, not an ending but a beginning. They had been right to believe in each other. They had been right to dare the world to judge them. And they had been right to build a love that would outlast gossip and time and everything else the world could throw at them. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, forged in the fires of scandal and judgment, and proven indestructible by the simple fact that it was real and true and absolutely worth fighting for.